and thank you for joining us for another episode of Hope for Healthcare with Dr. Katie Cole in partnership with ICD Healthcare Network. Dr. Katie Cole is a holistic physician, organizational well-being consultant, and change agent, working with industry leaders and proven strategies to heal our national healthcare system and our culture of medicine. Stay tuned to hear today's speaker.
Well, welcome everyone to Hope for Healthcare. This is a podcast in which we interview expert leaders around the country on best practices for healing our national healthcare system and culture of medicine. Today, I want to extend a very warm welcome to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Tammie Chang. And I had the honor of knowing her for the past year. We met through Dr. Louisa Duran, who is her co-founder of Pink Coat MD. And we also had the opportunity to co-lead a workshop together in February of this year at the LA Burnout Symposium on best practices for healthcare transformation. So Dr. Chang is a board-certified pediatric oncologist. She's an award-winning author, TEDx speaker, leadership coach, podcast host, and fierce national advocate for culture change in healthcare. She is the co-founder of Pink Coat MD, the co-founder and director of Elevate, the American Medical Women's Association Leadership Development Program for Women Physicians, and the medical director of Provider Wellness for MultiCare Health System. Dr. Chang has received numerous awards, including Women We Admire's Top 50 Women Leaders of Washington for 2022, and 2022 American Stevie Business Awards. She won 2 of them, Woman of the Year and Women of the Year in Healthcare, and Health 2.0's 2022 Outstanding Healthcare Leadership Award. So needless to say, Dr. Chang is definitely qualified for this podcast discussion today. I'm so excited to talk with you today, Tammie.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dr. Katie Sophia Cole.
Well,
it's an honor to be here.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, I always start out, with asking, what is your own personal journey with burnout in healthcare? And, I know that you also have a history of depression that you've been talking about openly. I would love to hear about your journey and what got you into well-being in healthcare.
Oh, of course. I think so many of us have a journey. We've been through our own story, right? There's something personal about it, and that's certainly the case for me. And I've been very open intentionally because this is something, honestly, I think it's a almost universal experience in some way for almost all of us in healthcare. And none of us are alone, but a lot of us feel really alone, right? When we're struggling. So I haven't been practicing. I've been out of training about 10 years, so not forever, but I guess I'm sort of younger, but not really anymore. But I'm in the cusp of becoming a mid-career, but I was only 5 years out when I really hit rock bottom. And I talk about that quite a lot in all the work I do. And I'd gone to really intense training. I did an intense fellowship at St. Jude. It's not like I was a new person to a tough lifestyle, right? And tough training that we've all gone through. But there was a constellation of factors when I hit really severe burnout about 5 years into being an attending where I work now. And I'd struggled with depression off and on since college, and it really hit rock bottom at that time too. So I was actively suicidal and couldn't do it anymore. And that really is the turning point. When I look back on it, it's about 5 years ago now that happened.
Wow. And it's really interesting. And the same thing happened to me even 3 years out of residency training. And I was suicidal as well. And I've talked openly about that. It's interesting how that can just kind of creep up on us as physicians because we're so high functioning and we're trained to push through things and persevere through depression and anxiety and things like that. So we don't realize things are really escalating underneath, the deep layers. So thank you for sharing your story. And I know that you did a TED Talk last fall titled Women Doctors Are Struggling in Silence. And in that TED Talk, you shared your own personal journey with that, as well as how you were able to overcome your burnout. Can you share a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. It's always hard to tell a huge story in 10 minutes, right? But I think it's part of the challenge and the fun of putting together a TED Talk. So I tried, my story was a part of it. And then just to open it. And then it really focused on trying to summarize all of the key issues and data that women doctors face today in modern healthcare, 2022, 2023, in 10 minutes, so that if someone was brand new to this whole concept or subject, they could really get everything they need from that 10 minutes through a story.
Wow. Well, you definitely, I've listened to your TED Talk many times and it was very powerful in the way that you designed it and you wove in some storytelling as well. Um, what what did you do to how did you reach out for help, or how did you recognize that it was time to do something about your suicidal thoughts and depression?
Yeah, I'd actually been having suicidal thoughts for some time, but
Okay.
I almost drove my car off of the road coming home from work. And it,
Sorry.
oh, I mean, now I can talk about it with a fair amount of, and you're a psychiatrist. So I'm
I
always like, ooh,
know.
what's going on with me? Tell me what I should have done better. Like, help me. But it wasn't until that moment that I was like, oh yeah, something's wrong with me. And
Mhm.
until then, I was like, we just suck it up and we put our head down and we just keep going, right? That's just what we've done our whole lives. And I mean, I've certainly done that my whole life since I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
So, and I mean, yeah, and I think most of us who are physicians in our training, and that's our culture. We just don't complain and we keep working. If it's hard, just work harder. Don't complain and work harder. So it wasn't until I actually tried to do that, and I didn't obviously, but I came close to. And then I drove home and was like, okay, something's wrong. I
Mhm.
called my best bud, who's also a pediatric oncologist. We did fellowship together, and I actually didn't tell anyone what I almost did for several months. But I was like, I need help, and I just like broke down crying and couldn't speak anymore. But I actually didn't even really tell anyone that I tried to do that. I tried it with my Cliff until I saw Louisa again, who's now my Pink co-founder. And that was about 3 months later. So I was sharing this recently over coffee with a friend. I didn't even tell, I saw two counselors, two therapists. I obviously reached out to my boss, our chief medical officer in our hospital. I didn't tell them either because I was so worried. This is why you and I are so passionate about this work. I was so worried. I was like, first of all, I can't end up in the ED. I don't want to end up in a psych hospital.
I know.
I don't want to lose my license. I can't lose my job. Like our whole identity is so wrapped up in the work we do as physicians. And so
Oh,
I was smart enough to not tell anyone that I actually tried to do
ugh,
that.
that just makes me sad. And I was
Yeah.
right there with you. Here I am, a psychiatrist. And, what was I going to do? Like, I had really no one to turn to,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, I'm the one that specializes in suicidality.
Yeah.
So I hear you. It was really hard. It was a really hard time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of shame around that, which is
Mhm.
why I'm so grateful that we're getting out there and we're sharing our story, because we're losing 1 to 2 doctors a day to suicide right now. And I bet
Yep.
you it's even higher than that. I think it's underreported.
Yep.
And I think the more we share our story, my hope is that even if a physician or nurse or any healthcare professional is listening to
Yeah.
this, they're going to know they're not alone in those feelings and that they are not normal,
Yeah.
and that, there is help and that there's hope as well. And there's people like you that are fierce advocates for healthcare well-being and turning things around. So we don't feel so depressed and so isolated
Yeah.
and hopeless in healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're actively I feel like you and I are part of a big movement, right? And there are
Yeah.
many people who are actively working with legislation to remove the actual legislative fear, right, that we have about our licenses and our credentialing. So,
And that's
but
helping. I think we're almost halfway there with Corey Feist and Lauren Abreu.
yeah, I think we're up to like 22, 23
Yeah.
states.
Yep.
I think we've had a couple more in the last couple months, so maybe we're up to 25 now.
I know. That's
So we're
exciting.
getting there slowly but
Yep.
surely, right? That's the kind of stuff. And then over time, that's how we change a culture. Like the culture is not going to change overnight, but over
And for
time.
anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about the legislation in terms of changing the languaging on medical license applications for each state, as well as credentialing at healthcare organizations in the state, so that we as physicians don't have to say, yes, we've had depression, or yes, we've undergone therapy or had any kind of mental health treatment. The only question they leave is the one, are you currently disabled or unable to practice? So it's really helping. I think we need to spread the word on that too.
Most places don't know, and even where I work, we actually just got it all approved through our system, and we're still trying to
Congratulations.
figure out how to share that information so everyone knows about it.
Well, yeah, keep me updated and I'll certainly post on social media
Yeah,
when you
it's
do.
official. It's
Yeah.
official. So we'll start sharing it. But yeah, it's a journey we're all on together.
So then you decide you're going to co-found a nonprofit or Pink Coat MD,
Yeah,
right?
we're actually not nonprofit.
Or
Yeah.
nonprofit, you're for
We
profit.
sort of. I mean, whatever. We felt really strongly that because there's sort of a bias about women, the work we do should always be nonprofit. And we said, no, we we are going to break that stereotype
I
and that
love that.
bias that women should always do things for free. And we're like, no, not that nonprofit is free, but and we're not trying to make a lot of money. Like our goal is ultimately to be sustainable enough that we can have our own foundation and then have our nonprofit arm, right, too, as well. Like there's way more power in being able to do that for others. So yeah, so that was something we were very intentional about.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit about Pink Coat MD and your mission and purpose with this organization.
Yeah, I shared the first person that I actually told about this actual suicidal piece of my story to was Louisa, who had been my friend since we were 18. We met freshman year orientation of college. We were in the 8-year medical program at Brown together. And so we go way back to when we were kids, right? So there's deep trust. And we reconnected just by chance after that summer that I struggled that period of time. And I'd just gone back to work around that time and I shared what was going on. She shared her struggles with me. We literally walked around the block in Seattle and then I drove her to the SeaTac airport. And in that, I would say about an hour of time, we were like, we got to do something. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but we got to help other people because we can't be the only two people struggling out there. And when we were struggling, what we did was just start Googling like help, like help me, things for women. And there are some other groups out there, but it was early. Even this was what, 3-4 years ago that we were looking into doing this. And we realized, so just by, because we're both, we're physicians, we're very evidence-based. We're like, there's got to be people who've done research about this stuff that works in an evidence-based way. And so we started digging through all the literature. I mean, we just spent a lot of time on PubMed and Google. That's what we did. And then we discovered this wealth of information, which you and I are so passionate about, right? The work of Stanford, Mayo, the AMA. And we know that there's a ton of resources that are evidence-based. Why is it so hard to find them all? And can we tailor them specifically for women? And what are the needs of women too, on top of regular, just not even just physicians, women physicians. So then we tried to really, what we intentionally built was like one big umbrella where we bring all the key high quality, like the best quality evidence-based resources under one umbrella. So it's not overwhelming. It's all included so that a woman just essentially, she's struggling for help, can come to this, or struggling with her career can just come to the website and know that everything on there is like curated. We've actually tried it out ourselves. We've either like taken the course or worked with the coach or like we've like literally tried everything out, and it's all evidence based on purpose because like we essentially created what we wish we had when we were struggling for others.
Well, yeah, and I love that on your website you even show the outcomes. It sounds like you're evaluating how it's going, and you really
Yeah.
help women get promoted to leadership positions in healthcare, and you help them with self-compassion and resolving their own the individual side of burnout. And helping them decide how they want to stay in healthcare, what niche they want to play in. I think that's really important. And I just want to highlight and thank you for helping to keep women physicians in healthcare.
That's our goal
Physicians
is,
in healthcare.
well, physicians in general, but I think our key is if we can help a woman physician save her career and then even just not even save the career, but thrive in the end and then become an agent of change. I mean, if she wants, I mean, that to us that's our dream, because what really motivates us is knowing that we're not it. Like there's a whole nother generation. And I think it's very present for Louisa because her own daughter, who's 8 now, really wants to become a physician.
Yeah.
And so we actually, I have a photo of little Annie here next to my desk all the time because it's like it keeps us centered and on our focus. Like she's our compass because it's a lot, all the stuff we're doing. And we're like, is this what is the right thing for the next generation for Annie? Well, we want this for Annie. And it's kind of our litmus test for everything we do.
Wow, that's a really, really powerful symbol, and it really puts things in perspective, I think, and helps us because what's coming to me is that I don't know if we're going to see all these changes in the next 5 to 10 years. It's happening, and we're part of this movement, and we're all leadership advocates, but I don't know if we're going to see that shift in healthcare
Yeah.
until Annie's generation, where it's consistent and it's accountable and it's evidence-based practice to have employee well-being. So
Yeah.
I think it helps to see the long haul, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what we're doing right now is setting a foundation for 20 years ahead, 15 years
Yes.
ahead. And we may not see the immediate benefits right away with the work that we're doing.
In fact,
Because
we're probably not going to.
it takes time.
It takes time, and I think it's also that's also what keeps me going too, because it's remembering that, and this is actually the next book I'm writing, but it's all about looking at the past and where we've come from, right? I'm not a historian at all, but I've learned so much just because I'm fascinated of how do we get to where we are today in healthcare, and then how do we get to here where we are, especially my focus is women. A lot of it is women. And how, I mean, 100 years ago, we couldn't even vote, right? Until 102 years ago in our country. You think about it. And even though there's so many, in that TED talk, I talk about all the tough stuff, the data, right, where we're at. But the perspective is that you go back 50 years, I mean, it's like dramatically better. It really is, but it takes time.
It does take time,
Yeah.
which brings me to my next question.
Mm.
You are director of provider wellness for a MultiCare Healthcare System,
Mm.
and I would love to hear about your own experience and what it was like trying to initiate like a well-being task force and to get things rolling, and what your process was.
Oh, of course. I mean, this is part of that workshop we did together, so it was really fun to put it together and realize, oh, we have done a lot. It's been 2 years, but it always feels like you've never done enough, right? At least for me. I always feel like we haven't done anything. Nothing's making it's anything helping. It's anyone feeling helped by this work. Because you can't always measure the immediate effects, that's what we were talking about. So it's wonderful to have the chance to reflect and go, oh yeah, we have created some important foundational pieces that are going to set the foundation for the 5, 10, 20 years from now.
Mhm.
So
How did you begin?
yeah. Well, so we had version 1.0 of our physician APP wellness program. We're really trying to transition to not use the word provider out of respect for many people in our country don't feel comfortable with that word. And so we're actually not, it's still in my title technically, but we're not using that word actually anymore at work. So, which is to me huge progress. So
That is huge progress.
yeah. So we had a former version that was essentially one counselor, part-time 0.1 FTE that was providing counseling. He was from our behavioral health network to our physicians APPs back then, who actually I worked with when I was struggling. And then we had an efficiency of practice team because we were so lucky that one of Chris Sinski's early team members from the AMA moved to the Pacific Northwest and needed work. And thankfully, she found our organization, and now she's one of the leaders in our system, but essentially created like this whole state-of-the-art efficiency of practice team ended up being Epic specialists and lean practice optimization specialists. So when I stepped in, along with my boss, who actually came first and then me, we had that foundation, and then we just essentially created a whole new version. So everything I've been involved in is really in the last 2 years. I stepped in well, I guess it's literally been exactly 2 years almost. Like it was April 2021. This is April 2023.
Happy anniversary.
I know. I'm like, oh, so I shared because I had my personal burnout story.
Yeah.
Right. You and I have been the same, but I didn't know anything about actual burnout science. Right. So like a good little medical student, I was like, okay, well, I'm just like when we started the pink coat thing, I'm like, what is the data? What are people doing? Someone else smart has been doing something. Otherwise, we got to do it. So I just sat down and I'd already read some of this, but then I really dug in. Like I took the first 3 months and I read every paper I pretty much read as many of Chanifeld's papers like I could. And Lottie Derby and Colin West and all the work from Mayo Clinic and Stanford and what the AMA is. I like read all the modules and the step forward things. Like I read just everything I could find. And then I was also researching what other systems were doing. And it's the early days still, even a couple of years ago. So I started with that, and then I just started getting to know people across our system because I'm a pediatric oncologist. So I had been full-time in our pediatric hospital, one of 11 hospitals. You and I were just talking before. Yeah, but I'd worked here for 10 years, but I didn't know anyone outside really my hospital, not very well. So I had a lot of people to get to know because I was in this role half-time and then clinical half-time. So I spent a lot of time just getting to know all the key people and players. Pretty much anyone who has anything to do with a physician or APP, I was like talking to in our system.
Well,
So I think I shared.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's really important to highlight because you
Yeah.
have an entrepreneurial brain, and I do too, and we've had our own business for a long time. Like, so
Yeah.
that's something that you do, like when you're in private practice, you get out there in the
Mm,
community, you network. Like, I love the
yeah.
fact that you highlight that that's what you did. You just put yourself out there and started networking and talking to, the key leaders in the healthcare system. I think it's great.
Yeah, it was very grassroots because I also knew from my perceptions as a physician working in the system that there was a fair amount of mistrust of the wellness program. That people felt like, I mean, there was some efficiency of practice, but and they had a good reputation, but people kind of felt like, oh, it's kind of that we get the eyeball roll from our physician colleagues who say, oh, our system's trying to do something, but it's just a bunch of yoga or whatever, and they're not really trying to fix the actual problem. So I knew there was that sentiment and that we had to overcome. And so I just started from day one, started trying to build trust for us. And I've become the face of our programs. And I not only met with leaders, but I also, and it was intentional. And I went to as many medical group meetings and as I could, like I did over lunch or after work. And at that time we were still in the height of COVID, so everything was virtual. So, but it was still possible to really connect, virtually, thankfully. And it made it possible across a big system that spans the entire state of Washington. So I spent a lot of time doing that from the very beginning. So it was a lot of talking to people, getting to know people, networking, building trust from day one.
That's really important, and I'm glad you talk about trust.
Yeah.
Because there is a part of everything we're doing that is about relational repair. And there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of judgments, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
misunderstandings out there. I think when you're dealing with a large healthcare system, especially when you're
Yeah.
trying to roll out a new program. So I'm glad you shared your process for trying to rebuild trust and psychological safety there with leadership.
Yeah, it doesn't, and with the people on the ground,
Yeah.
because we can create all the great programs we want, but if the people on the ground who are supposed to utilize them don't trust it or feel it's genuine, they're not going to use it. That's one of
Mhm.
the biggest issues when we're within organizations, right? I mean, only a fraction of people, like in the last few Medscape surveys, they always ask, so is your system doing things to promote your well-being, your burnout or your mental health? And then they always ask, what percentage, how many of you would you actually ever use it? And it's like a fraction, right? Would you ever even want to use the stuff that's offered by their system because they don't trust it? So that's a big hurdle.
It is a big hurdle. How are you working on building that trust on the front line and getting clinicians and employees engaged in your initiatives?
Yeah, I think that's why it really took a couple of years, but it was that grassroots approach.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's literally me and I go and so we also build it. We have like two approaches, right? So we've got the people who already work in our system, and then we have all the new people who are being onboarded coming in. So I go and I now meet with every single new physician APP who joins our system.
Mhm.
So that means I go to onboarding every 2 weeks in person, and I give a 30-minute wellness overview introduction, but I share my personal struggle and story very openly and talk about we're
Mhm.
on this journey together. And I think I'm grateful that I'm able to gain their trust, really. And it's like starting slow, like it's literally one person at a time, right? These are groups of like maybe 5 to 10 people every 2 weeks. But I go and I do it. And then everyone new coming into the system is slowly becoming part of that culture change. And so then I meet with we have our Indigo, which is our urgent care retail health centers. So they have their own separate
Mhm.
employer thing, and then the other side of the system also in Spokane, which is the other region in our system, does it too. So I meet with them all virtually, one-on-one or in small
And
groups.
I love that idea that you're going to all of the onboarding meetings as well. I think
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to start building trust even with new people coming into the healthcare system.
Yeah, and of course then we've got the existing culture, right? That's there. But over time we're chipping away at that too. So I mean, I essentially, I would say about every 6 months, twice a year. I've only been in this 2 years now, but I've gone like taking the show on the road. So last fall, I think I did over 40 all provider leadership, medical director meetings, and I went and just shared. I pretty much just shared the data in my story, the data, and then what we have to help people. So, I mean, I think each time I do that, it's building that trust over time, again and again and again. And people are realizing we now have more people who've engaged in many of these programs, right? And so then they're talking about it with their colleagues. So that's part of that change, really. It takes time.
It does take time, but I think the key is consistency
Yeah.
and keeping your word. So if you say, hey, this is our plan, we're going to be working on Epic in this particular area in Epic, and this is what we're going to be doing over the next 6 months, and then you do it and it's done, then I think that continues to build trust. I think there needs to be action as well.
And follow through.
And follow through. Yeah.
We essentially do what we say we're going to do. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way we can build trust over time as leaders.
Well, that's the definition of integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. What are some of the top lessons that you've learned along the way?
I think that's such a great question. We always have things we're learning, right? I think for me, I think one of the biggest ones is to realize that we actually have to slow down sometimes, because I'm all about, like you and I were like, we're gonna go do it, make it better, blah, blah, blah. And I and you know what? That change does not happen on our timeline, right? And that's like the summary of change management. Like now I've become like, I'm involved in a whole lot of change management all the time, right? With my system and groups and departments and parts of the hospital, whatever. So it's such a huge lesson, because I'm a go kind of person, and you realize that does not work. You got to like do it on the timeline that everyone's ready. You got to meet them where they're at and bring them along with you slowly but surely. But it literally took 2 years to build the trust, to create what we now have is a system-wide wellness collaborative. So that was one of the gifts of me getting to meet anyone who had anything to do with wellness in our system, because not really no one else knew what anyone else was not knowing, but very few people knew what other people were doing. So then we created this group where we all come together once a month and then try to really create change together. But it's taken 2 years to build trust in that group, really. Even,
wow.
Right? It takes time, but now we're able to really move things forward because there's that trust that we built over the last couple of years together.
Got it. And I really like how you described that building trust, it does take time. And as a psychiatrist, I understand that. And we have broken trust in healthcare right now. And for many reasons, the pandemic has highlighted that. It's multi-layered. And even trust within leadership teams and across the system. So when we talk about repairing relationships and building trust, when you take it one step at a time and you don't rush the process and you allow space for that trust building, it happens organically. And I think it happens more naturally.
Yeah. And that's when we can really create synergy and collaborate then, right? Like that's the foundation. And so it's really hard in today's landscape where we see a lot of turnover in leadership. Maybe within every 2 to 4 years, there's like a new crop of leaders in many systems around the country. And we have a whole lot of turmoil from a financial standpoint in our system. But I'm always seeing headlines about how many jobs are being cut right every day. I know. In healthcare. So it's hard to build trust because it takes time. And then yet we've got this like rapid cycle of turnover. And it's also the work that you and I are so passionate about doing, right? We don't see that ROI in like 6 months. Like that's an ROI that we may not see for 2 to 5 years or even more sometimes, the work that we're doing now today.
What else did you learn, or was there anything that you tried that didn't work for your system and you would have done differently?
I actually think that we rolled everything out at the same time and we could have spaced it out. Again, slowed down. So, I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's actually good now because I started April 2021. That first 6-8 months was really just planning, budget, getting things off the ground, building foundation. And then we were able to launch things come January 2022, January, February, because we had the funds. And we essentially kind of rolled a lot of stuff out between January and April. And I think it was a lot. Like we could have actually staggered that and spaced it. Because you have to help people see what's going on, right? And if you throw like 6 things at them, they're going to be like, I can't do any of it. So I think we did, in hindsight, we actually could have staggered that a little better. So we rolled out our peer support program. We rolled out our meal programs, which is essentially like the Mayo Clinic Compass or Commensality, or I guess Stanford does that too. Groups like where people got to meals together. We rolled that out. We had a thriving clinician educational program that we rolled out. We rolled up the Mayo Wellbeing Index. Like we did and we had an echo storytelling event. We like rolled it all out like in this, and then we had a new website that created. We had all these flyers. So we like we're pushing a lot of stuff out, but it was all at the same time. So I think in hindsight, we learned that we actually could have spread that out. Now it's fine because those things are in existence. People know about them, and we're just building on that foundation now.
Well, that's good to know. Which initiative would you have started with first? What would have been your priority?
Well, my priority all along was the peer support program. Okay. And because even though it's still underutilized, because it's just our culture of, especially physicians, it's so interesting. We were talking about this over dinner, I know, during the healthcare conference that we were both at in LA, and it's physicians in particular are just so loath to be vulnerable and share what's going on and even reach out, right? But for the 30, 50 people that we touch, it could potentially save a life, right? None of us know what could have happened. So it's worth it, no matter, even if it's just one person. But I think we rolled that out January, but I think we could have given that a little time and then rolled out the meal programs, then rolled out Mayo Wellbeing Index, over probably 6 to 8 months or so.
Okay. That's really, I always like hearing everyone's story of, what it was like initially building their wellbeing program and, what they learned along the way. And my hope is that anyone listening today, if you're in a leadership position, maybe you're listening to this and you're at the point where you're trying to decide what to do, you can always reach out to Tammie and talk to her. And, she obviously is prioritizing peer support. As a psychiatrist, I wholeheartedly support that. So I'm curious, Tammie, is there anything else that what's your message today for everyone? What do you want everyone to take away from our conversation?
Well,
because we've gone through so much.
A lot. And I do think it's actually a lesson for me too, which I think you and I talk about often. Those of us doing this work, and when we get engaged in it, it's right now we're under-resourced, right? We're at a time of financial contraction. Healthcare systems are going out of business. So it's hard to get essentially resources as in dollars to support our programs, right? It's hard to get FTE. It's hard to get administrative support. It's hard to get help. And a lot of us are the solo or in a very small group doing this work in our systems. And so there's only so much of us, right? And we have to protect our own energy, because if we're not doing okay, we can't be effective in this work. And many of us are small, mighty teams that are trying to impact, I've got 5,000 physician APPs that this is their well-being, right? And so and there's only one of me, right? So, and we have a very small team. So I think one of the biggest pieces is all of us involved in this work, we've got to take care of ourselves first. Otherwise we're not going to be effective. We're not going to be able to be sustainable in this work. And I think also too, I think so much about how to model what we're trying to help other people do. And I am the worst at it sometimes, and I fully recognize it. And it's something that I'm working on constantly with my own therapist and my own coach that I work with consistently. I'm a coach too. And any one of us who's a coach needs a coach, right? We all gotta have someone has to hold us accountable for what we do.
Well, no, and I mean, I have a coach, I have a therapy coach as well. And I need that accountability. And, we're also high functioning. We have all these ideas. We're creative. We think outside the box. We're very motivated. We have lots of things that we want to do. And that doesn't even include our passions outside of healthcare. So I think for us, it's about prioritizing daily and managing our energy, managing our tasks and our capacity. And I know that when I take a step back and I pause every day, it helps me not to overcommit. It also helps me to focus on what I'm doing that day and be more present. So, but I still overcommit.
Same.
It's a weekly thing, honestly, Tammie. I look at my calendar every Monday going, why did I do that?
Same. I know. but it is better. Even though I feel overwhelmed sometimes still, but I'm I'm overwhelmed less. than I was a year ago. Like, it is better, and I'm intentional. And one thing I'm trying to intentionally do too is there's so much stuff on the plate. And I really appreciate this is actually from my coach, and I'm like, I'm just sharing it in case this could resonate for anyone listening, which is me, and I think for you too, Katie, and many of us in this work as physicians, like I'm like an 85-mile-an-hour person, right? Like, I don't do anything halfway. I'm like all in. If I'm going to do something, it's going to be done really well and thoroughly until it's completed and executed, and then we can move to the next. Like, I'm not, we're not half-assed kind of people. Excuse me. We don't do things half, but we can't be 85 miles an hour in everything we do. There's just no way for us to. And so I'm intentionally thinking, all right, all these things on the plate, some of them are going to get 25 miles an hour right now. I'm going to go in the school zone, right? Some of the things right now have to be at the speed limit, 55, 65. But then they can also take a back seat for a little while. So I'm just intentionally giving everything a mile per hour speed, and it's actually really been helping me in the last few weeks. So just sharing that in case that could resonate for others.
Oh, I really like that. I really do. And, we also have seasons, and I'm getting ready to move across the country, and it's a big move for me starting over. And, I'm having to manage that because I want to have energy and capacity to build a new community and to start over. So I think that I love your analogy of like the speed zones. I'm definitely going to use that for myself over the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm 85 all the way.
No, I think we're 85 miles an hour kind of people. That's just what we do.
Sometimes 100. I mean, 85 is
I know.
low.
But I also don't like speed. Like, I don't drive very fast actually in real life. Like, I'm follow the rules for I grew up in Oregon. I'm always like waving at people and driving at the speed limit.
I love it.
In actual life, but yeah, working on it.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up today, and everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. And, I just want to thank you, Tammie, so much for not only just you were being vulnerable, you were being transparent with us, sharing all of your experiences. And I think that we took away some really helpful hints. And for any of you that are thinking about starting a wellness task force, please reach out to either one of us, and I will make sure that we have all of Tammie's information on her webpage, including her books that she's published and links to her website and Pink Coat MD as well. So thank you, Tammie, for being here.
Thank you for doing this work, Katie.
Yeah,
Dr. Katie.
Pleasure.
You are a gift, really. So thank you.
Well, so are you. We're in this together.
We are all in this together.
We're all in this
together.
Really true.
Really true.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.